that is out defending the Palestinians in their pursuit of the land. Did you have a question?
Well, I'm just reading ahead, I think, but on 31, it says his armed forces. 31's describing basically the Antichrist, and would that be the king of the north then? His armed forces?
Yes.
The king of the north?
Yes,
Yeah.
we're talking about a
This
king
would
of the
still be
north.
the vile person.
The Antichrist.
Right.
But let's continue here. So he's going to return. Oh, I'm sorry.
Regarding showing favor to those who forsake his holy covenant, what about things like oil embargoes?
Well, I'm sorry, what?
Oil embargoes, other economic pressures that, all right, if you don't go along with us, we're going to make you suffer.
Yeah.
Right.
But we're going to reward our allies, those who agree with us.
Boycott Israeli products.
Yeah, whatever.
Sanctions in reverse.
Yeah.
Sanctions, yeah.
Yes, Steve.
Some of these people who forsake, he was so favor to those who forsake the Holy Covenant. Could that perhaps be some view?
Yes, I think
Well,
so.
the common view, and most commentators agree that it's treacherous Jews within Israel. I personally believe it has to do, this is when the 10 nations are getting together, confederating. He is exploiting the hatred throughout the Middle East that this peace covenant has to do. In other words, this peace covenant, you must remember, has granted recognition of Israel's right to the land and the holy places, right? Well, there's a lot of people throughout that region that will not be happy. There'll be an animus and a hatred of that. I believe this is when he's having secret intelligence with them and exploiting that. And Israel doesn't know what's about to hit them. I don't think there's people in the government, and certainly if there is treacherous Jews that's assisting him, they sure don't know what their help is going to end in. That's for sure.
I was thinking Jews, but others that you just described.
In this view, it would be...
It could be European nations, or it could be northern.
I think it's the other Arab nations that hate
Right.
the covenant, and you've got to find who in the world hates this covenant. Well, Phil's introduced a consideration there. I mean, there could be others who know there's a financial risk here or something like that would join in the fray. But these are 10 militant nations that other nations will come later, but 10 militant nations take initiative against Israel. They have one thing: it's a hatred of Jerusalem. I believe these are the 10 kings that hate her flesh and burn her with fire. And there's a lot more to Babylon than just Jerusalem. I understand that, but I believe that is a part and an aspect of this hatred. It goes back to the everlasting hatred. It goes back all the way to the contempted hatred that the Jews would have that land by divine right. And by the way, here we are talking about a term called the Holy Covenant. And if it is as we believe, future, then what this establishes is, even before Jacob becomes Israel, he has no less a divine right to that land. Right. Because when you come against that Holy Covenant, you're coming against God.
That's right.
And most people today say, well, it's not a good idea to beat up on Jews, but my goodness, there's no more difference between the Palestinian and the Jew than Uruguay and Paraguay arguing over land borders. Oh, that misses the whole point of a passage like this. And that's our evangelical brothers, they're saying that. So,
Yes, Steve.
So on 28, I just want to make a comment. It says, King of the North will return to his own country with great wealth. Meaning, he was going for the Holy Land, right? So in the 9-year war, Iran and Iraq, the original plan was to go and take over Iraq and go for Holy Land. Because Ayatollah never succeeded, and he returned.
Yes.
Back in the 70s, when I first saw this, I actually believed that Iran and Iraq would be these, perhaps, just to consider that, because it would be two nations, mighty nations, that would have one common thing, that whoever won the battle, they would team up against Israel. And I absolutely believe you're putting your finger on a scenario that, I don't know the exact nations, but that I believe will be the scenario.
So, but here you're saying could be some Jews that turn against Holy Land. Right?
The common view of the commentators, mostly because they think all this happened back in 2nd century BC, are looking for treacherous Jews that had complicity or involvement with. They had sort of there was like a pro-Syrian party. It was the liberal Jews that advocated Hellenism, Hellenization, Olympian sports. They were the liberal Jews in the land that was favorable towards Antiochus.
So we had the largest seminar of rabbis in Iran last year. They had 3,000 of them that were against Holocaust. They were willing to go as far as claiming that the land does not even belong to Jews.
That's true.
Right.
So we have that.
Yeah.
We have that in our evangelical brothers, that until the Jew gets their act together, it doesn't become their land. That's not what Scripture shows us. It shows us that when you violate the everlasting covenant and come into that land, you've gone too far. Wherever that line is, that's the line, and God's fury comes up in His face. And when they come down to divide the land and scatter His people, and here we're going to read in Daniel 11 how they divide the land. Joel chapter 3 verse 2, it moves God to His final wrath. So something tender in the heart and mind and eye of God's being touched. He's the one bringing them down on one hand to discipline His nation and bring His Son back to Him. On the other hand, they've gone too far. It's both true at the same time. It's an amazing. But here's the point. Those rabbis, like my evangelical brothers, are dead wrong. That land is their land. Even when they're kicked out of it, they may not be able to enjoy that land without covenant obedience, but it's no less their land. If the Jew was chosen because of moral superiority, there would be no offense. Yeah. It's the very fact that he's chosen quite apart and independent from any moral quotient. Absolutely. His election is not contingent on his obedience. Never has been. God will not let him enjoy the rights of covenant until that obedience has been secured, but it's God who in His sovereign spirit knows how and when to do that. And so in a way, He's covenanted with Jew on the basis of future grace, basically.
Yeah.
But I think,
Can I
go
ask
ahead.
one question? We haven't got to the abomination that causes desolation, but we've already lost peace and security, peace and safety.
Right.
It seems to me like, because He's already gotten furious.
Right.
Well, there's sword rattling going on in the region. It hasn't impinged yet on Israel. He would like to get to Israel, but ships of Chittim, when he was kind of feeling his way south after his successful victory of that king, the king to his south, the ships of Chittim are in the islands of the Mediterranean, the coastlands of the western, what today would be the Mediterranean Sea. Our Sixth Fleet was there for a lot of the time. The ships of Chittim check him. The Mediterranean naval power, put it that way, check him in one of his southward advances. At that time, no alarms go off, no alert goes off. He goes back home grieved and indignant. And now he has an excessive, frantic hatred. And now I believe it's when he has the conspiratorial engagement. He's working with the other people, whether it be Jew, and I personally believe the other Arab nations that hate this.
Verse 28, it says, He will take action. He set His heart against the Holy Covenant. He will take action against it and then return to his own country.
Does it say that in my translation? And in other words, he sets his heart. He's doing exploits. He's consolidating, making friends throughout the region. He's not yet taking the Holy Land. So he's not yet entered the Holy Land. He's had success against the king of the south, and he's had to retire back. He's had to retreat because of the ships of Chittim. But it looked like he may have been showing some interest towards Israel, but he's being checked in his advance, and he goes back home, and that's when he accelerates his plotting against the Holy Covenant. And then it says he comes down, but it's not like the former or the latter, because this time he's been checked. But the latter, which would be the verse 31, he has absolute success. There's absolutely he prevails against the covenant.
But the point is, the agreement has already been made.
In verse 23.
And they're living securely.
Yeah, as a result of
But look at the zoom lens prophetic focus now. All of these words covenant are appearing all over the place now as we go through this narrative. Yes?
Yeah, I've never seen this like this before, and I want to make sure I'm hearing it right. I've done this study on history, and it's really cool if anybody hasn't. I mean, really do the study, puts it all together. But according to what I see with you right now, and I don't understand it, the history's there. It's all in Scripture. I've done the study. But it seems like we go from history to future in a verse.
Mm-hmm.
We go from past history that has existed.
Right.
Has been fulfilled.
More specifically, you go from nailed down, definite, fulfilled history, and in one verse you've moved into type and pattern, which,
prophecy, future, in one verse.
Yeah, but prophecy, albeit with some real type and pattern in history. But that's what makes this so difficult, because the real exhaustive fulfillment is entirely future. But there is a partial fulfillment by Antiochus. that does, and that's what makes this so tricky, because there are parallel points, there's intersections with what actually happened in history with his actions. But that doesn't line up in every particular, and the Word of God has to be every particular.
And again, the reason that we've gone back and followed the antecedent, it's talking about the same person here, all the way back to verse 21.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've never seen it like that. That's
Okay.
what I'm saying.
It's a mysterious overlap.
It's a mystery to me now,
Yeah.
because I used to try to figure it out. Who's he?
Right.
The commentators will help you out to supply a historical, what do you call it, a historical match for everything. And the more critical scholars are bold to tell you they don't always match up too well. But there is a substantial parallel. But then what nobody can explain is that it goes right into prophecy that's never been fulfilled, but not at one point. It sort of fades in. There is a clear one point. There's a real clear verse break.
I want this guy to be destroyed. I want to go to the end. Yes, Willie.
2 quick points. The ships of, I assume you said that's just like the Mediterranean naval.
Right.
Kind of
Yeah, that would have been terminology in those days for
Roman warship.
Greece or Rome. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just vague. And then the second, what are some other examples of that sort of moving from history, or are there, as you said, there were some
Yes.
other, what are some other examples of moving from history into the more eschatological?
Oh, they're all throughout.
At almost every mention of the day of the
Almost
Lord,
every
you
prophet.
have a near and partial fulfillment, Medes and Persian, the Assyrian, and against that is the backdrop of an ultimate day of the Lord.
I asked that so that maybe...
Let me tell you one of
And a few extra
the gap. We're talking about a gap. One of the most ones I always like to cite is Isaiah 61. Jesus went into the synagogue in Nazareth and picked up the scroll of Isaiah and began to read. And he said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has appointed me to bring good news to the afflicted. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and freedom to the prisoners, to proclaim the favorable year of the Lord." And he stopped and put it down, because do you know what the next verse is? "And the day of vengeance for our God." Yeah. There's 2,000 years between those two
Micah
verses.
5, Hosea 6 and 5. Yeah, it's everywhere.
It's the two mountain peaks we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
I think
Is it ready? Okay. Okay. Yes.